Good afternoon. On behalf of AAE Board Member and Director of Professional Development, Neil Otto, it's my pleasure to welcome you to another webinar hosted by the American Association for Employment and Education. Today's topic is why Broward County is getting straight A's in recruiting. My name is Tim Newbert and I serve as AAE's Executive Director. Please allow me to cover just a few housekeeping matters before we begin with today's topic. During the webinar, all attendees will be muted. However, you are encouraged to submit questions or comments using the Q&A feature within Zoom. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to attendees and AAE members. If your organization is not a current member of AAE, please visit our website, aaee.org, to learn more about our activities and resources. We are a professional association intent on positively impacting education through professional connections. Related to that mission, we connect the three critical groups involved with the preparation, recruitment, and retention of pre-K through 12 educators: university professionals and others who prepare educators, school system professionals and others who recruit, hire, and retain them, and of course, educator candidates themselves. We offer annual publications such as the Job Search Handbook for Educators. We conduct an educator supply and demand survey each fall and winter, resulting in a spring report. In fact, it is currently underway, continuing until January 31st. We co-host the careersforeducators.com job board with Kappa Delta Pi. We host webinars such as this one on topics relevant to our membership. We sponsor teacher scholarships and school system mini grants to support teacher pipelines. We host teacher job fairs, both in person and virtual. We co-host a national working group on teacher retention with Upbeat, and we host an annual conference and education career fair each fall. We are planning to hold our October 2022 event in Baltimore, Maryland. I am pleased to be joined today by Ibi Manji from Career Fair Plus, who will introduce her co-presenters from Broward County Public Schools in Florida. Thanks for joining us today, Ibi. I'll now turn it over to you.
Thanks for the introduction, Tim. Hi, everyone. As Tim said, my name is Ibi, and I am the Customer Success Manager here at Career Fair Plus. Just while we're still probably waiting for a few people to come in and join, we do have a poll to begin with just to kick things off. And in the background, I'll let you guys answer that while we just introduce the webinar and kind of what we're here to discuss today. So that should be on your screens right now. And in the meantime, for those of you that don't know Career Fair Plus, we are a recruiting events platform. We're passionate about trying to help you create meaningful connections between job seekers and employers through various types of events, in-person events, virtual events, hybrid events as well. And we've come from various different pieces of the recruiting process, so we know that it is demanding. Our goal is to provide you all with an accessible, intuitive, and really an easy to use platform where the tech is straightforward and we can share our tips and experience through the process. So the main reason that we're gathered here today is, as we'll see hopefully shortly when you all answer the poll, is that school districts everywhere have been struggling with staffing shortages. That's probably not news to most of you. Some school districts have been using virtual events to try and connect with candidates. Some are considering new means of engaging with candidates. And we're here today to share the lessons learned by one particular school district that we at Career Fair Plus have been working very closely with, and they're happy today to share their best practices and the lessons they've learned through the experiences, and that is Broward County School District. They've been seeing a lot of success with their recruiting strategy, so I'm really excited to be able to introduce them. We can probably go ahead and end that poll and just take a look at the results.
Is it coming through?
It looks, yeah, it looks like they should be on the screen if they're visible. It looks like most of you have said lack of qualified candidates and competition for candidates are the biggest struggles that you've seen in recruiting this year. So I'll leave those on screen, and I'll leave some of the statistics here on the screen as well in terms of what the challenges have been Statistically speaking, as you can see, 89% have said they've noted major challenges in trying to find candidates, hiring challenges due to budget cuts as well. So I'll hand it over now to Golda and Victoria at Broward County to introduce themselves and give us some context and what they've been working on, and a little bit more about their school district also.
Okay, well, I'll start. My name is Golda Hoff, and I'm Human Resource Administrator with Broward County Public Schools. I've been a recruiter with the district for approximately, I would say, 15 to 20 years. Prior to that, I managed the substitute teacher application team. I love recruiting. I love interacting with candidates. That's why I joined this team. Broward County Public Schools is a very large district. We are the 6th largest school district, and we have approximately, oh, there it is. We have approximately 241 schools in our district. So we service a lot of schools, which is very different than what we've seen in other school districts that are up north. I think Florida has a very unique on how many schools we service. We have 261,000 students and 34,000 employees. As far as how we utilize Career Fair Plus, we utilize it currently as a tool to recruit our current teachers. There may be some other avenues we may look at in the future, but right now it's mainly to interview our teacher applicants.
And thank you, Golda. I'm Vicki Kaufman. I retired from Broward County Schools, but I'm still with them. So over 40 years with this great district as a teacher, a principal, and an HR director for hiring principals and assistant principals. So my passion is always students and getting the best teachers in the classroom. So I've been working with instructional talent acquisition department to recruit teachers. So as Golda said, again, we have challenges that you all have, the qualified candidates. And so hopefully we'll talk about how Career Fair Plus has helped us to expand and reach more candidates.
Thank you so much for those introductions, Vicki and Golda. That's a huge school district, so 6th largest in the US, and some big numbers there. I just want to get a sense of where our audience is at today in terms of numbers and district sizes. So we do have another poll just to sort of get that context today, which is how many vacancies you all currently have. So that poll should be launching shortly. And feel free to answer that just while I talk about what we're going to be going into next. So we're going to be asking questions to Golda and Victoria today. So we're going to dive right in. If you have any questions that come to mind, anything you would like to ask them about what they've been doing, their strategies, how they've been using Career Fair Plus, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. We'll be monitoring that. We'll be happy to answer questions as they come through. So feel free to put those into the Q&A box, and that should be on your Zoom taskbar right next to the chat box. So if you want to put them in there, that will be the easiest place we can monitor. And I'll let the poll question stay up there for another 30 seconds or so. So feel free to get answering. And we'll go ahead with the first question for Golda and Victoria, which is what led you to venture into virtual recruiting events initially? What was the inspiration for that?
So initially, of course, COVID, and we had no way to meet in person with candidates, which was our traditional way of having teacher fairs, and we also have them monthly because we need so many teachers. We don't just have an annual fair in the spring. We meet with teachers every month. So we still, of course, had a need for teachers, and we had a lot of vacancies. So I started researching different platforms because we were using Zoom and Teams like everybody else, and it was still very labor intensive. How do we get the candidates scheduled? How do we let them have their options of times? How do we get them to the principal to interview? You know, some of them got frustrated in the waiting room, waiting to be moved into their breakout room. So began investigating different platforms, and many of the universities were using platforms. And so I became acquainted with Career Fair Plus through some of the colleges. I believe it was specifically University of Central Florida at the time. So that's what led us to that. Also, how do we expand the candidate pool? How are we going to reach people if we're not having an event? And this would give us an opportunity to reach people, throughout the country without them having to come here in person. So that's how we started it. I wanted to kind of replicate the in-person format, still have that personal touch for the principals and the candidates during the interview process, but doing it virtually. And we found that Career Fair Plus was the one that could do that for us.
Awesome. So what you mentioned it sort of briefly, but what was your first event that you held then in that case? And if you could elaborate more on that.
So the first event we had, again, we were nervous to really go into a big event. So we did start small. We had a group of our current teacher aides who were looking to become special education teachers. And so we held an event for them to schedule interviews with our recruiters. And I think we had about 60 something people. And so that was the first event that we did. And we had some district staff as well join us so that we could test the platform for having more than one person on the interview panel with the candidates. So that was the first event that we tried. And that was in the spring of last year. Of this year, 2021.
Okay, so that was earlier this year. So you started small, and how many virtual events have you held since then?
Hulda?
We've actually held 6 events. As Vicki said, we were very apprehensive. We were excited about the platform, but we wanted to make sure that we had everything in place because, as most of you know, our customer service are our principals, and we wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with the platform and that they would feel confident in what the platform delivered. And we saw success in that. So yes, we started off small, but we had a total of 6. ESC being the pilot, and then we branched out into our major job fairs, and we typically have 2 job fairs a year, and now we're continuing with our monthly events.
That's really interesting because I know that there are some, for example, universities, they may be holding 1 or 2 major events a year. If you're holding them monthly, that's probably doing something to help you draw in more candidates, or at least giving the opportunity for that to happen. Where would you say most of your candidates come from? Are they local? Are they through college partnerships? Do you see any coming from out of state?
Very good question. We're getting a combination of both. So typically we promote our event through our applicant system. We use Frontline as our applicant system, our applicant tracking system, and we typically promote through that venue. And we also post information on social media to invite. But then also we realize that as soon as we post our event on Career Fair Plus, we're also advertising for those individuals that are currently on the platform, and they may have Broward County as an interest, and so they'll see our event and they'll be able. And then we also have it where we tell them a little bit more about our event and how to register for it. So with those avenues, we get a lot of interest for our monthly events, and we find that through those pushing out emails, posting it on our website, we're getting our candidates not only in state, but also out of state. And some of them are interested for next school year, and some of them are interested for their current school year.
That's interesting to know. There is a couple of questions coming in through the Q&A box. So someone's got a question about the monthly events that you run. Do you typically stagger the timings for those monthly events, or do you run them at the same times, same days, every month?
I'll be honest with you. What we love about this platform is the flexibility that it offers our principals. In the past, when we had our monthly events, getting principals to have the time to attend, physically attend, was a challenge. So really it was 3 or 4 of us having a full day of recruiting, interviewing candidates, and then sending them those lists to principals. Now that we have this platform, our principals can schedule interviews. Probably our principals have a flexible schedule so that if they have a schedule that's in the morning, they may say, I want to interview people from 9 to 12 up until 7 o'clock at night. It all depends on how their schedule goes, and candidates are setting up interviews with them after school. So we find that flexibility allows a greater audience of participation from our principals and also candidates that are working.
And again, when we had the in-person interview days, you know, a principal never or very rarely interviews a teacher candidate by themselves. They always have, you know, their team lead, their reading coach, an additional staff member with them. And so when they had to leave their school, come to a site, you know, pull somebody out of their school, that disrupted their day. Here, they can schedule it, like Golda said, around their time. They can have other team members from the school staff join in the interviews as well. So that's another benefit.
So there is another question which you sort of just answered, and I think flexibility of the platform and them being able to create their own schedules was a huge solution that you mentioned. But there is another question from Lynn saying, how are you able to get administrators to participate in monthly hiring events, which is a fair question. So I think you mentioned, you know, them being able to, as you said, customize their availability, have multiple people come in. They don't need to take time out to drive to an event. That probably helps. Is there anything else that you could mention that helps you draw them into the events?
Well, they're desperate for teachers right now. We need teachers. So, you know, we may not say that this interview day, we usually don't. We don't usually say each month, this is for every principal who wants to come. We specifically target the schools that have a hard time recruiting candidates. And so we may say this event is for, you know, these particular elementary schools, or it may be just for math candidates or science candidates. And so the principals who have those vacancies, Golda and the rest of the administrators, we, you know, reach out to the principals and say, we're going to have this event. We know this is the vacancy you have. So we don't just have it as a big fair and come who may. It's very targeted to the schools who have a specific need or multiple vacancies. So they want to come when they hear they're going to have brand new candidates, you know, to come and see.
But it is controlled. We do have some control systems in place because we want to make sure that, you know, we have enough candidates for the number of schools that will be participating. And so far, it's worked out very well. So as Vicki said, we target those schools that have high number of vacancies is one, and then those schools that have a challenge in getting candidates to apply to their schools directly. So we try to work with those schools mainly because there are some schools in our district that they may get 100 applicants applying for one job. We all want to work at those schools, but we may have some schools that may only have 5 applicants and they've been looking for candidates for a while. So we use those strategies to look at our vacancies that we have, and those schools that have high numbers, have challenges, we invite them directly, but we don't close the door on those other schools that may say, you know, I'm having a hard time finding a physics teacher, or I'm having a hard time finding an autistic cluster teacher. And so we do invite them on the platform as well. But so far the ratios have balanced out.
And all these candidates are vetted for minimum eligibility. We don't interview and pre-screen them. So the principals are doing 2 things. They're interviewing for their school, and then they're also rating the candidate for us, for our district. Either there may be a good candidate for a different subject or a different school, or no, this is not a candidate we should continue to interview for other schools. So the principals understand that they're doing 2 things. They're helping us, because again, our department can't possibly keep up with screening every potential candidate for a district the size of ours. So they help us do that as well. And so Golda has been, you know, instrumental in working with them on rating the candidates and us getting that feedback to enter into our system and Frontline, so we have a recommendation of for that candidate.
I think all of that is really useful context, and it probably answered a couple of other questions that are in the the box as well. So one of the things you mentioned about being able to get administrators and principals to participate in such regular events is by focusing it. And, you know, they're not necessarily always large all school fairs. They're probably targeted with specific subject areas or types of teachers, or maybe experience level. So one of the questions is, how are those events organized? By subject, by school, by geographic area. So I think that goes some way to answering that. And also if they are, if the principals are interviewing for just their schools or for the district. So if there's anything else you want to add to that, you mentioned that they sort of will screen them for the district as well.
Correct. We tell them, if you're going to join our party, you have to participate.
That's one way to get their involvement. So there is another question. Do you hire year round?
We do. We do.
Every day.
Yeah, as Vicki said, attrition happens. Teachers go on leave. You know, resignations, especially with COVID. There are so many things that are happening personally with our teachers that we've just had, and I'm sure some of the districts are on there can relate to it. We've had increase of vacancies just due to attrition and the specialties of what's been happening. Increase in retirements, things to that sort.
And we have never kept a substitute in the classroom long term. If we know the teacher is not on a short-term leave, if a teacher has left, you know, even in October, we're going to fill that spot. Well, now nationwide, we know you can't even get a substitute if you wanted to. So we're having struggles with that as well. So we do hire throughout the year.
And we also have to remember that we also have graduates that are coming through the education pipeline. So with our College of Education graduating some of our currently our fall December grads, with this event, we really tried to push to have our education grads participate. And our principals, as you know, those are our key candidates. So our numbers were very high with principal participation because those were the targeted candidates, along with the other all of our other candidates that are in our pool.
Yeah, there's so a final question from the audience for now. I've got a couple of others I want to ask as well. So are you seeing now that you've transitioned more into virtual events, at least lately, and as you said, post-COVID, are you seeing a larger influx of candidates from out of your area now that that's the case?
Yes. We're seeing a lot of, so it's very interesting. Those candidates that are interested in interviewing with, we provide 2 opportunities, and we tell our candidates in advance. If you would like to interview for a principal for a current vacancy, go directly to interview with that principal and also recruiter. If you're looking to interview for a future opportunity, because some of our candidates are looking for next year, only interview with a district recruiter. So yes, we do have people that are out of the area, but the majority of our candidates right now are local candidates because they're looking to secure jobs at this time. Now, when we had our summer fair, we did receive a lot of candidates from the out-of-state areas that interviewed with us because they were ready to start working for the beginning of the school year. And that was our July fair and our August fair.
So it sounds like it might sometimes depend on the time of year as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Lots of foreign candidates. I mean, when we use the Career Fair Plus and we kind of let candidates from the site register, we do get a lot of out of country that our district is not currently sponsoring visas. So we do have to respond to those candidates, but I've seen it increase from out of the country as well.
Yeah, that is very interesting. So I have one more question is, how did you feel? I know that for a lot of people moving into the virtual event space has, as you said, it's kind of scary at the start, a little bit intimidating perhaps. How did you feel when you began creating job fairs and recruiting events specifically virtually, and especially after that initial intimidation probably died down?
Well, I think that the biggest piece is Career Fair Plus provides a lot of training and hand holding. I know our first event There was some things behind the scenes that Career Fair Plus did for us before they turned it over to us to make sure that we'd be successful. So participating in all of the informational webinars, reaching out, Ibby was always our contact. So Ibby would immediately get on with us and answer our questions and provide assistance to us. An email, I would get a response immediately. So getting the help in the beginning and digesting all of the information and processes before you put it into practice was really helpful. Trying small events first, and then asking, practicing it. Don't wait for the event, and then always do a follow-up. What worked? What didn't work? What would work better for us? And as Ibby and the people at Career Fair Plus know, we constantly, call and say, well, what about this? Have you thought about this? And again, they're willing to make changes and continue to adapt the product to meet the needs of a K-12 school system. So I think that was the scary part again was, and is it going to work? Are people going to get on? Because I've used other platforms with some college fairs. I couldn't see the people. I couldn't hear the people. The technology is great. We haven't had problems with people connecting or talking to people or seeing it or letting people in or people waiting for the next appointment. It's very customizable for your time, interview times. And so it's very easy to use for the candidates and the scheduling. So it just takes practice and commitment. And like I said, paying attention. And then pretty much as we train the rest of the staff, because I learned first and Golda, and then we trained everybody else, it was pretty simple to train each other. Wouldn't you say, Golda?
And yes, I will say that. Now, I'll be honest with you. I was one of those apprehensive individuals on the team that when it was first stated, let's do it for our job fair, I freaked out because I know when you deal with we have massive job fairs. I mean, we've had close to 800 or more candidates that show up in person to our in-person job fairs. So my biggest fear was that we would not be able to execute and be able to troubleshoot all of the issues with starting with a larger platform. So that I was one of those that was apprehensive. But what I found was that as Vicki said, what was so important was to actually go in there and test it out. And one great thing that I liked that Career Fair Plus did, they gave us, which is really funny, they gave us a testing model that actually closes next month. So we were able to create tests on the platform to actually be able to import our school participations. So when a school participates in an event, we import that information, but they gave us a year to practice or more to practice on a platform that wasn't live, so that we tested it out and we made mistakes, but the good thing is it wasn't live. So practice was, I think, the most essential lesson that I learned. The videos helped, but you still need to know how to manage it on your own. And so the practicing tool that we did, and then after we did a practice, we went and we reached out to Ibby again and said, listen, Ibby, we're having a training for our principals. Can you join? Ibby's response, sure. So we had our first training session with our school cohorts. Now I'm saying a lot. I don't know if Ibby will be able to do that for every district in the future, but it was just really nice to know that you weren't alone and you had support. And that was the best feeling. And once I saw that we got that, the apprehension went down, because when I managed the sub program, I remember having technology, and when we had a system crash, and you're trying to troubleshoot issues by yourself. I just keep sticking in my head the fact that we've had very little issues, because as soon as we sent an email to someone, we got a response to help us out, navigate through what we did wrong, what we did right, how can we make it better. And that was a good feeling to have. Did I answer the question?
And the other thing is, when we were looking at when I was looking at the platforms, as Golda said in the beginning, the principals are our customers and the candidates. So it had to be something easy for them. And so I went on other platforms where the schools would have to create booths Okay, and Golda and I, as recruiters, had had to create booths for some of these online events that we were ready to scream to create the booths. I knew my principals would not be logging on to create a booth. Okay, we could barely get them to type a sentence about their school. So the Career Fair Plus was great in the sense that their logo was brought in, the district logo. They just had to type a statement in our database that always stays there about the school. So again, that was a really user-friendly piece for our school and our district anyway. Unless you really like to create booths, not one of our favorite things to do.
And one thing Vicki said that maybe you all may not know, we set up a registration process outside of Career Fair Plus so that all of our schools would access our in-house database, giving us information about their school and different highlights about our schools and websites. And so we have that database available. So whenever we do an import of schools that are participating in an event, we have that already set up in advance. So that was one thing that I think we did smart, that we collected all of that data beforehand, and then we only imported those schools that were participating in a particular event. So we already have their information.
Thank you guys for those very comprehensive answers, and you can't see it because of the lighting here, but you're making us blush over here at Career Fair Plus. I have another poll for everyone now, just to make sure everyone's awake. And that question is, do you, as in the audience, do you host your own recruiting events? And this could include job fairs, it could include info sessions, it could be hiring events. So that poll should be up right now. So go ahead and feel free to answer that. I'd like to hear from Golda and Victoria as well, to ask them what different types of events that they've tried as well, if any.
Golda, want to do that?
I'm sorry, what type of events have we tried in the past?
Yeah, what different types of events have you tried? And what I mean by that is that, on a virtual platform, you might be hosting onboarding sessions for new hires, you might be hosting sort of those induction or training events, you might be hosting pure job fairs, you might be hosting those hiring events, or they may just be informational kind of sessions. So you've spoken a lot about those kind of screening events, recruiting events, where your principals or assistant principals are interviewing or screening candidates. Have you held or thought about holding any other types of events?
It's funny because we're having this conversation now, and I'm just thinking on how, because I know that Career Fair Plus allows you to have a one-on-one or a group session. So as we're talking, I'm kind of brainstorming an upcoming event that we possibly could use your platform to host, but I'm not going to put that out there yet in this audience. So typically, because our district has a partnership with Microsoft, we use Teams for any internal events that we have. It's easy for our teachers to join Teams. As a recruiter myself, I've used Zoom because there were a lot of things in Teams that were still being built and developed on that platform. So I've used Zoom. Some of our trainings are done in Zoom because of the breakout abilities to go into different groups. But mainly I would say Teams is our platform of use for any district related. And now when I do one-on-one interviews, because outside of Career Fair Plus, I also interview candidates one-on-one. But Teams does allow me to send a meeting link to an individual, and I'm able to access them because it is a district supported platform to do those type of events, and our onboarding as well.
Okay, interesting. So currently doing that separately, but if we can go ahead and end the poll, and let's just take a look at some ideas that other school districts have held, as well as the results that are coming through. So from the results, it looks like so the question was kind of other types of events and that you may have tried and how you've been hosting those. So it looks like most people answered, over 50% have done both in-person and virtual events, which is encouraging to see. And then almost equal amounts of people have said they've done virtual events only and in-person events only. But just to give an idea of different types of events that could be hosted on a platform like Career Fair Plus, as I said, that could be career fairs and job fairs. They might be benefits fairs, and this can apply to, of course, other companies as well as just school districts. They might be hiring events. They might be information sessions about your schools, about the departments within the schools. They could be networking events. So just some other ideas of how you might want to get candidates interested, or sort of get them engaged in the process or into your pipelines. It could be an onboarding fair. It could be just a panel discussion. We've also seen other organizations and institutions hosting sort of college fairs for students as well. So there's lots of different ways. It might be an event for, prospective parents, potentially. There's so many different options. So time to get kind of creative with how you can bring candidates into the process. So Golda, whenever you guys plan that event, I'll be excited to hear about it. So let's talk a little bit. There are a couple more questions in the chat as well. There's one question here, which is probably one that I should answer. So I'll steal the light for a minute. Carla is asking, what is the capacity of the Career Fair Plus platform and how many participants can it accommodate? Which is a great question. The development team has informed me, I'm not really from a super technical background, but the development team always says that the platform can accommodate, in terms of participants and numbers, the capacity of the platform is way above what anyone would ever need it for. So just to give you an example of a fair that was held a couple of months ago, probably about September time, we had an event that had probably a few thousand recruiters attending and over 30,000 candidates that came onto the platform to book their meetings, to attend their meetings. So at least that many, and in theory, many more as well. But Carl, if you would like to have any more specific questions answered or speak to the team, please feel free to reach out to us. And I hope that answered the question. So back to Golda and Victoria. Another question for you is, how do you feel that virtual recruiting has impacted your strategies specifically? And if you have any specific outcomes here to share, that would probably be really interesting to everyone listening, I'm sure.
Well, I'll say for one, the statistical data. We try to track how many candidates participate in our events, how many schools participated in our events, and then also the follow-up of that participation. I think the statistical data and the analytics that come from Career Fair Plus is probably the added bonus that has been a very easy method for me. When we had our main job fairs, we would collect sheets of paper and we had a check-in system to know what schools actually showed up, how many candidates actually showed up. And it was a very antiquated method of doing events. But the way that we're able to pull and excrete that data from Career Fair Plus immediately, we send surveys out to our principals now, and we're able to pull what schools actually participated and the recruiters that participated, and we send a survey to them within 24 hours, finding out how the interviews went, how can we improve, how are the candidates, and so we find, and then also we're able to monitor from the moment the event opens and is published for the candidates. We're able to monitor how many candidates are now registered, so that I now can send out email blasts. Like this last event, I think we registered about 100 candidates, a little over 100 candidates. And when I saw there were only about maybe 5% of those candidates on the platform, I started sending out reminder emails to them. And by the time the event actually started, we went up to about 50% of candidates that were registered. So looking at that and being able to monitor that has been very helpful. looking to see whether or not our principals actually set up their schedules and reminding them to do that has been really helpful. So I think the statistical data is really a great thing for us that we didn't have before easy access to.
And we can target, high needs subject areas. So if we need a lot of social workers, we can do through our advertisements, hey, this day, interested in being a school social worker, this is the day you're going to schedule an interview, log on, and we can do events just for that. Also, we used it, sometimes throughout the year at FTE and rebudgeting time, schools may have to decrease teachers based on their budget, but we want to have a place for those teachers. So before, we would email them, what school would you like to go to? These are the schools with the openings. I think we did use Career Fair Plus, where they just this is the event for these teachers. These are the schools that have the openings. Sign on for what you're interested in and who you're interested in, so they can see the school, do their homework. Well, I'd like to interview with school A, but not school B. So, and we continue to plan to use it for that as well. A much easier process to give that targeted audience of teachers the opportunity to interview for existing vacancies in our district and secure a position.
Thank you. There's a question I actually missed a little that came in through the chat box about how you market your events or how you advertise them. So if you have any tips on that as well, drawing those candidates in.
I think we're all experiencing the challenge, right, of not having enough candidates. Each of our districts are finding various ways to find candidates that, first of all, have the passion, desire to work with kids. And then that being our campaign push, we market our applicant pool. I think I mentioned that before. We advertise on social media platforms. And we find that with the number of applicants that we receive and advertising through our social media forms, that's how we advertise mainly for events that we have. But we also are we're flexible. So in the past, we used to be very specific, very strict as to who we allow to interview with our principals. Our minimum requirement is having a bachelor's degree, and our I feel like I'm giving away all of our secrets. But we found that we have to be flexible, and I think that's the best way to say it. We have to be open-minded and flexible as districts now, because now we're looking at career changers and finding people that want to teach and love to teach, and working with them to find a good fit. And so when you talk about marketing and advertising, I think we had to get out of our norms of education, and I'm not going to say lower our standards, but finding people that have the passion and working with them from where they are. And that's been a great help.
Thanks, Golda. You might have missed the memo that we brought you to this webinar to give away your secrets, so now is not the time to let us down. So a couple of final questions. We've got some time left. Still accepting questions from the audience as well. And you've spoken a little bit about this, but have you had any specific feedback that you can share or general reactions from your principals or your hiring managers? You've spoken about training and getting used to the platform. But other than that, how have they reacted to the virtual events and to the hiring fairs that you've been hosting?
They love it. One of my principals mentioned, I was very concerned because, sometimes, what's going on? Why aren't you guys setting up your schedules? Come on, move along. I called one of my principals the other day, and his response was, Golda, I have to get in on the platform. I have to get in on the platform. And I'm like, okay, I'll get you in. I'll get you into the interview day. He was like, you don't understand how much I love this platform. I'm like, you love it? He's like, I love it. So I would say that probably our technologically, you don't have to even be great at technology to use this platform. It's so user-friendly. So the response has been awesome. I think principals like the idea that, again, the flexibility of being able to manage their schedules, being able to access the platform we publish our events 2 weeks before the actual event. So our principals start building their schedules. They start looking at resumes way before the event. Sometimes they hire candidates way before the event because the candidates post their book an interview with them, but they may book their interview with other schools. So their strategy and being able to access those candidates, and candidates are allowed to schedule and not wait in lines to meet with principals, is one thing that I think our principals love. So I've only heard great stories about the platform. Once they're on it and they actually use it, it's all been positive. Vicki, I'm pretty honest. I'm brutally honest. But Vicki can share more. But everyone that I've spoken to, they all have said praises about it.
We had an event yesterday and several teachers were hired yesterday as well.
Yeah, that's always positive to see those. I'm sure that even you guys as the host, it's kind of like tracking the numbers for each event. It's really exciting to see how they go. There is another question. There's a question in Q&A. I'll come to that one in a second. I'd like to hear, based on the experiences you've had training your principals and hearing that feedback from them, how have candidates reacted in that case? You mentioned something at the start about them not having to wait in waiting rooms and things like that, but generally, have you had feedback from them?
Yeah, I think we struggled in the beginning. Again, if you're not familiar with the platform, basically, if you want to pre-screen your candidates and say these are the candidates who are allowed to attend, then Career Fair Plus would indicate that those people would be able to register. And so we did have some difficulty with people registering that way. And that's when we decided to just open it up and provide the information to the candidates. So once we eliminated that barrier, we haven't had any problems or complaints with people signing in or interviewing. They find it easy. I'm not seeing any connectivity issues or yesterday I had a lady who her bike wouldn't work and I just said, log off and log back on. She did, she came right back into the room. You know, the knocking feature, so you know someone is there and you can tell them just hold up a minute. So the candidates have, you know, I think they like the flexibility as well to pick the schools they'd like to interview with and have a time that's convenient to their schedule.
Thank you. So with we've got about 10 minutes left, so we'll probably have time for 2 or 3 more questions potentially. So keep them coming if there are any. I'd like to ask, I know we have a lot of people here who might be new to virtual events as well as our platform specifically. What advice would you give to someone just starting out? If you had any lessons that you learned along the way that you could share with somebody else, or if you wish someone had told you something beforehand, what would those secrets be?
I think we kind of talked about that. I addressed that in the beginning, you know, about, you know, watching the, you know, a lot of people don't like to read directions and want to figure it out themselves. I think the webinars and the information and the hand-holding from Career Fair Plus and IBI is what helped us find it very easy to get, you know, acclimated to the platform. So you just got to, like Golda said, practice, ask questions, and then you should be okay.
Yeah. One thing I just want to say, just pay attention to the different profiles that are set up for candidates. And, you know, it's hard to explain it if you're not in it, but there are some profile criteria that when you're completing your event, the system has automatically fills those areas for you. And so we had our first event, we didn't pay attention to that, and some of the profile criteria blocked our candidates from scheduling their interviews. It was in all of the practice materials, but we were, you know, kind of moving in fast pace, and we disregarded it. So paying attention to those profiles, making sure that you're not blocking candidates for participating because they did not indicate
GPA or something.
GPA, or
right.
they didn't indicate a criteria that was just not really necessary for an interview. You could see it on the resume. So we learned from that, but nothing major that I would say that we weren't able to immediately see it and be able to update it.
Great, thank you. And probably final question from my end, at least, before I pass it out to any other audience questions. What do you expect your recruiting to look like going forward? Obviously, now that we're coming back, or hopefully returning to some level of normalcy and people are getting back to in-person events, what do you expect your strategies and your recruiting to look like as we go forward?
I'm really excited because, I'm getting old, and dragging these tables around and setting up these big venues that we have. And again, being a large district, as Golda said, with these large fairs, some of the problems that come with those fairs are long lines at some schools, no candidates at other schools, candidates waiting on the long line only to find out when they get up to interview, the position is filled. Then they come to us. I spent a whole day here. I didn't get any interviews. So I'm really excited to do a few different things that, Career Fair Plus refers to as the hybrid model. So having an in-person job fair and actually having the people schedule ahead of time, or they'll show up and go, I only wanted to interview with Bayview Elementary and they're not even here. And that's my dream school. Why aren't they here? So if we do this, use Career Fair Plus in advance for an in-person fair, they'll see what schools are going, who's attending, what vacancies they have. They can apply, get their scheduled interview. The principal also, I'm a former principal. If I have 4 people in line and number 1 seems good and I don't want to lose them, I might hire them not knowing what 2, 3, and 4 could possibly be like. But with this platform, I'll be able to look at the resumes ahead of time. I'll be able to see the candidates when they're scheduled. And what we're experiencing now with our current events is some of the principals are going on ahead of time, looking and calling them before Career Fair Plus interview to get them ahead of time. So, moving to an in-person event with a scheduling component is going to be great, as well as even doing some hybrid so that they don't have to fly in. We can still schedule, you can still select your schools and your interview times through the platform, and the principal can still do those virtually. So I think those are the things that we'll be able to implement when it comes. I know years ago in the history of the department, and speaking to our director, they tried once to schedule and promise people 3 minimum interviews, and it was a nightmare. So we're always talking about how do we schedule people in advance in large numbers, and I think we have it now.
Yeah, we called it, I think, what is it called when you do speed dating? We called it speed dating. And I agree with Vicki. When you have a lot of people that are standing in a line and a principal's interviewing someone and you have 30 people waiting to meet with that principal, it becomes very difficult for that principal, the pressure of having to make a decision right then and there. So I definitely see it as a hybrid, but I probably see, similar to what Vicki said, having a face-to-face career introduction and then setting up an interview on the platform to really take the time to really be able to make a decision, as opposed to the rush of having the adrenaline rush of doing everything in quickly so you don't lose a candidate. I definitely see that as our future, but we'll see. We're excited.
Yeah, that's great. It does. We're seeing a lot of our customers as well moving back to in-person events using the platform in a sort of upgraded fashion where they're still having those in-person, face-to-face interactions or meetings, but using that scheduling component and still, as you said, Vicki, giving them that opportunity, giving employers or hiring managers or principals to see those profiles in advance. And as you said, it's great that they're actually reaching out ahead of the event, before the event itself, to schedule interviews and get ahead of the game.
Yeah,
so for those of you, again, yeah.
So for the teacher monthly interview days, like Golda said that we were doing, we were using our frontline Apple Track system, which does generate interview series. People can register for a time, but then I would have to take that, download to a spreadsheet, and then assign a recruiter or assign principals. It was so labor intensive, and the people didn't know who they were going to interview with. And again, this is just so much easier for them to go on, see the school, see the vacancies, see the principals, and not have us have to do all that.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like less work for you. So for those of you that don't know about Career Fair Plus or haven't used Career Fair Plus, we can help support virtual events, in-person events. If you're trying to do a hybrid event, you can reach out to us as well. So there's a couple of links coming into the chat. We've got an ebook that you can feel free to download for free. It is a guide to hosting virtual events. We've also got a K through 12 webpage. So if you click on the links in the chat or grab those links from the chat box, those will be helpful. And again, please feel free to reach out to us, stay in touch. There's one more question in the Q&A that is a final question probably for Golda and Victoria. What is the biggest takeaway you would say to everyone listening to this in terms of recruiting job fairs?
Vicki wants me to go first. Okay. The biggest takeaway I think that you can gain from this, obviously we were all pushed into the virtual world last year. And with that being said, my biggest takeaway is that to embrace something new, you have to try it out and be able to see the different avenues. Obviously shop. Vicki did a lot of the shopping beforehand. We were all on various virtual platforms. We had experienced it. But then when we looked at what this platform offered, we saw that the pros outweighed any possible con that we may have had in the beginning. So I would say, try it out, test it out, see if it works for you. And, but do it in phases. Do it in phases. Don't wait until the big event. Introduce it to your principals, to your candidates, to work out all of the kinks that you need to learn as a user and probably as a user expert in your district.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, get buy-in from your principals. Have some of them test it with you as well, and try the things and ask the questions for the things that you may need to customize for you. When I forgot initially, what was the first thing Career Fair Plus did to help us was upload the schools that were going to participate. You did that for us first, and then you kept telling us it was easy, but you did it first, and then we upload the schools now for the events.
We did do it for you first, and we'll always be there to help for any questions that anyone has. So with that, we're just about up on time, perfect timing. Again, feel free to grab the links from the chat, stay in touch with us, download any resources. If you've got any other questions for us or for Broward, I'm offering up Vicki and Golda as well. You can feel free to reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to help you however and wherever we can. Tim, if you have any final words, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your insights and information with us today, Ibby, Vicki, and Golda. Thank you also to our attendees. Look for an email from us in the next day or two with the recording link for today's webinar, as well as the Career Fair Plus resources indicated on Ibby's slide. And have a great day, everyone.